The first big question you'll need to ask when creating your Kindle book is, what niche are you going to try and compete in? This is actually one of the most important decisions you'll make in the entire process, as it will determine the audience for your ebook, the marketing options available to you, the amount of competition, and much more. If you don't choose your niche carefully, then you'll end up making a lot more work for yourself when it comes to promotion. And in the worst case scenario, you may even limit the size of your potential audience to such an extent that it's hard to make much money at all. Now, let's look at how you can ensure you get this bit right. If you have aspirations to be the next J.K. Rowling, then you might be tempted to make your book a fiction book. This, of course, is up to you, but you should know that you've just made your life a lot harder. You can market your book yourself, and we'll look at how to do this later on. But in the meantime, if your main aim is to make money, then you want it to be possible for people to find your book without having heard of it before. If your book is about gardening, then you can call it Gardening in Winter. There's now a very small chance that someone might just search for that exact phrase, not even knowing that your book exists, and find your title to download. But on the other hand, if your book is about wizards and it's called The Majestic Journey of Mr. Darkshadow, then people aren't likely to search for that title unless they happen to know about your book and they've read lots of good reviews. There are ways you can get round this, but it's not going to be as easy to get discovered. So making your book something that will get searched for is a good idea. And at the same time, if you can set out to solve a very specific problem, then this is something that will really help you to market yourself and sell your book. This is why non-fiction books tend to work very well, and especially those which solve a simple problem that a specific type of person is looking for. Think about the problem you're going to solve and think about the key phrase your book is automatically going to lend itself to. Will people search for the title of your book? Will they search for related phrases? But now you have another question. Do you aim for a large audience or a smaller one? Do you create a book that's going to be a small fish in a big pond? Or do you go where there will be much less competition? Case in point, you can either create a book about fitness or you can create a book about curling, the sport that involves sweeping ice. The fitness book is going to have a massive potential audience, and in theory, this means that you can sell to a much bigger number of people and make a lot more profit. But on the other hand, that fitness book will also have the challenge of needing to stand out in a very crowded marketplace. In other words, there are going to be hundreds of other ebooks competing with you to make it to the top, and your chances of standing out are going to be quite slim. Things get worse when you consider that some of those publishers are going to be massive corporations with millions of dollars to spend on marketing. You'll be competing with best-selling authors in the niche like Tim Ferriss, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Pavel Tatselin. Call your book Fitness 101 and you're setting yourself up for failure. Conversely, when you create a book on curling, you're going to find it much easier to stand out. Post to a curling forum that you've just released a new book on their favorite topic, and this will probably be enough to lead to a number of rapid downloads. People will be excited that there's new content on their favorite subject because it's a subject that rarely gets tackled. What's more, you have clear places to go to promote yourself, curling forums and Reddit pages, for example. There's much less content here, so posting will get you noticed. You can probably get coverage in magazines even, because the niche is so much smaller and there's less news to report. Try and get coverage by Men's Health, however, and you'll be competing with thousands and thousands of other emails. You can pay for Google AdWords in the curling niche and get lots of clicks for a relatively low price because the cost per click is calculated using a bidding process. And even if you do absolutely no marketing and no optimization, your book will probably be on the first few pages of the Kindle store automatically when someone searches. Why? Because there are probably only a few pages worth of content. But that's not to say that curling is the perfect niche. Of that small audience of people interested in curling, you're only going to manage to convince a small percentage that they should read your book. As a result, once you saturate that market, you may well end up with no one left to sell to. Another problem with the curling niche is that you're not going to change people's lives. You might be wondering why that would matter, but think of it this way. The reason that most internet marketers choose niches like make money online, fitness and dating is because those niches very genuinely could change someone's life. Being in better shape and feeling more confident as a result, having less body fat, being more successful with the opposite sex and earning more money, these are all things that are highly motivating. These are universal goals that almost all of us can, at least appreciate, and that makes your book much easier to sell. Better yet, if your book promises to make someone money, then in theory that expense could be an investment. That way, people will happily spend the money because they're going to be more likely to think that they can make it back. This in turn means they don't see any downside of spending the money on your book. Choose curling and you won't have this kind of life-changing power unless your book happens to be aimed at people who plan on making this their career. While people might still be happy to pay $5 for a book about curling on a whim, you won't be able to charge as much as you could for a book that offered to make them rich and attractive, or one they need to advance their career and fulfill their dreams. The key then is to try and choose a niche that will offer all the benefits of a big category without being so incredibly difficult to stand out and gain traction in. One way you might think about this is to go big but not too big. A perfect example of this is to choose an industry or career, and ideally you want something that you know a bit about. A perfect example of this comes from someone I once knew who wrote a book on stage lighting. Now, stage lighting is a niche that 99.99% of the population would have absolutely no interest in. However, that remaining 0.01% of people would actually benefit greatly from some kind of book to help them further their career. That guy managed to get his book mentioned in an industry magazine and on some websites, and it quickly became the #1 book in that category. The result? He was making hundreds of dollars a month, and this was on top of his regular salary, and it was a very nice little sum of cash. Likewise, you might work in a different career that you happen to know a bit about. Or perhaps you can use your internet marketing skills and hone them in on one specific career or subject. For example, how about teaching a counselor how to set up their own website and promote it online? Or how about doing the exact same thing for personal trainers, for people who want to sell homemade jewelry on Etsy, for people who want a career in photography? You get the picture. You should, of course, research the niche that you intend to go into as well. Don't dive straight in assuming that there won't be that much competition, as this can be a big mistake. Instead, make sure to actually do a few searches and to find out for certain whether or not there are lots of other books out there. Likewise, do some research as to the other routes to market that you can use to promote yourself. Another tip is to think about the contacts and opportunities that you already have available to you. Almost all of us know people in some kind of important position, and almost all of us have got some useful contacts or experience. In other words, if you happen to have been a #1 trader for a big firm, then that gives you a lot of reason to write a book about trading. Not only are you going to have lots of useful information to bring to the subject, writing what you know about is always a good idea, but you're also going to have contacts within your previous organization, you're going to have contacts with relevant industry magazines and so on that you can use. Likewise, if you just so happen to be best friends with the editor of Gardening Monthly, then that's a very good reason to consider making a book about gardening. Another option is to approach a large niche, but to find your own corner of that niche and your own way to make it your own. A great example of this would be to write a book about stretching. This is a fitness topic broadly, but it's also a topic that is a lot more specific than that. If someone wants to improve their flexibility, then you stand a better chance of getting noticed. Or how about a subcategory of fitness? That might mean Metcon, which is metabolic conditioning, HIIT, high intensity interval training, the paleo diet, although there's a lot on this topic, or power building. This is a combined form of bodybuilding and powerlifting. You could also look at a particular training appliance. For example, you could write the guide to the chest press for when people buy new machines to use at home. This is a particularly good option, and you can also write guides to other products. For example, what about a guide to using kitchen knives rather than a generic book on cooking? This way you could even speak to sellers of particular knife products and see if they might recommend your book to their buyers if you do likewise. In fact, you could even recommend it yourself in a review of their product. Instead of writing about martial arts in general, how about writing about a specific martial art? Better yet is if you can land on something that is up and coming. Find a movement that's emerging online and be the first to write about it, and your book will be ready for when people get really interested in that subject in their masses. This once again goes hand in hand with products. For example, how about writing a guide to using the latest iPhone model the moment it comes out? Or how about writing a guide to those hoverboards? You can be the first to what is likely to be a big niche, and in this way, and at that point, it becomes a little like market speculation. Or how about choosing a particular audience within a much larger niche? So instead of writing a fitness book aimed at everyone who wants to get fit, in other words, everybody, you could write a fitness book aimed at the elderly, the diabetic, or even people who travel a lot. In all these ways, you're finding niches that have a broad, universal appeal, but also might be easier to rank in for the search results. Despite everything I said in the last video, it doesn't mean you absolutely cannot write a fiction book and be successful. In fact, there are several ways that you can have a hit on your hands if you write fiction. You just need to think carefully about how to go about it. One tip to that end is to think carefully about the genre. In this regard, genre is going to work a lot like choosing a niche. Here you want to pick a subject that will give you lots of marketing options and that will have lots of fans ready to get excited about it and help you to promote it. For example, if you write a cyberpunk book, you'll find that there are whole forums where people discuss the subject and will probably be interested in reading what you've written. Likewise, you can find people who are big fans of gothic horror or of romance novels. If your book is really good, then word of mouth might be enough to help it spread. You can also use these phrases and words in your description and elsewhere on your listing in order to make your book easier to find. Likewise, it can help to think about books which are similar to yours. I'm not telling you to copy or to write books about stories that don't excite you. I wouldn't be that cynical. I'm merely saying that if your book happens to have a similarity to, say, the Da Vinci Code, then it won't hurt for you to emphasize that connection and to mention it. This way, people will be able to more quickly grasp what your book is about and whether they might like it. Again, it might be more likely to come up in searches or as a suggested similar book. Now you have the niche. The next step is to start creating your book. This is where a lot of people will get put off, but even if your English is terrible, I implore you to keep watching because there are ways around that. Here's some bad news if your plan was to flood the Kindle store with low-quality books. Kindle books need to be good if they're going to do well. This is down to the fact that you want to try and get as many positive reviews as possible and as few negative ones. Likewise, it's also down to the fact that readers can very often choose to read a free sample of a book in order to get a taste for it. This means they'll get to see what the quality of the writing is like, whether the subject matter is any interest to them, and whether you appear to know what you're talking about. And if your book is low quality, well, then they won't be very likely to order the full thing. Likewise, some textbooks allow students to rent the book for a while on a 7-day free trial. If you have created an e-textbooks for students, and this is an interesting alternative to the career option, then again you need to ensure that it's good if you're going to hold their attention for long enough. So with that in mind, what makes a good Kindle book? And what makes a good book generally, for that matter? A good place to start is with the tone and style of your writing. This needs to be appropriate to the tone of the niche that you're writing for. So if your book is about financial modeling, then it's likely to be a more formal style of writing than if your book is about drawing cartoons, for example. But in any case, you need to ensure that your content is engaging, that it's fun to read, and that people want to keep reading through it. A good way to achieve this is by using a narrative structure. In other words, make your book a story. Even if it's a non-fiction topic, that doesn't mean you can't open by talking about your experiences and by leading the reader gently to the subject. You need to make sure that your content is well written and that it's going to sound professional. That means it's a very good idea to read through the book yourself and to get friends to read through it as well, if possible. You want to get rid of as many typos or grammatical errors as possible. A few are absolutely bound to fall through the net, but you need to keep them to an absolute minimum in order to maintain that professional and trustworthy impression. If your book is badly spelt or has lots of errors, then your readers will feel tricked or shortchanged, and they're unlikely to buy the full book. Note that most word processing software comes with an inbuilt spelling and grammar checker. Make full use of this. But do bear in mind that it can't replace having a human set of eyes to read over your content for you. Another tip is to try reading out loud, which will help you to improve the flow of your book too. Both those last 2 points are particularly important for that initial 10% of your book, the free sample and the bit beyond. This is how you'll really engage with your reader and how you'll get them to keep wanting to read more. Another tip here is to spend a little time talking about what's coming up in the book and setting the scene. This is valuable because it will get your readers excited for what they can learn and what they can expect if they buy the full book. Having a what you will learn at the start of the book is always a good idea, as is teasing some of the most valuable tips and insights that you'll be sharing later. At the same time, make sure you point out just how your book is going to be different from all the others on the market. Especially if you're going for a big niche, you need to bring something unique and new to the topic that people haven't read before. If it's a book containing workouts, then you need to discuss the unusual and little known training methods found in that book that no one is aware of. That said, though, you don't want to waffle on with so much promise that it looks like you're just padding out the book. Aim to share at least one actionable tip in your intro that will impress your readers so that they will believe they can get more like that if they keep reading your full text. As well as ensuring that your book is well written and that you're providing real value, you can also improve the impact that your book has by thinking about some other aspects. One important thing to consider, for example, is the length of your book. Of course, longer books will at least appear to provide more value, so you need to ensure that your book is long enough to look like it's worth the money you're going to be charging. The longer the book, the higher the price tag that you can get away with. Of course, though, it's not all about the length. There are many other factors that are equally as important, such as the value of what you're sharing. Try to ensure that you're ticking both boxes. Have a long book that is nevertheless densely packed with useful and actionable information. A good standard length is 10,000 words. This is long enough that it will feel meaty and won't get complaints. At the same time, though, you can probably go down as low as 5,000 words, and there's no upper limit in terms of how long you want to make the book. If the mood takes you, you can make your book 50,000 words long. Make sure that you feature that prominently in the description though, so that people recognize they're getting extra value. That length is a selling point. Another consideration is imagery. Remember we discussed in an earlier video that the e-ink display is black and white, meaning that color images might not have quite the same impact they could do on another platform or in another format. Nevertheless, choosing to have some images will help to make your book look more professional, and it will also make it more engaging. You also need to think about the font, the layout, and various other aspects of your book, although we'll be talking more about the formatting and things later on. Just suffice to say that a large wall of tiny text is not an appealing thing to come across when you get a new book to read. On the other hand, if your book is nicely spaced out with large crisp fonts, lots of images, and a welcoming narrative structure that promises lots of interesting value inside, well, then that becomes a different matter. Now, some people might be watching this and wondering how on earth they can possibly write a book that's 5 to 15,000 words long and format it all beautifully. They say that everyone has a book in them, but that's not necessary to say that everyone has the ability to write that book and to make it entertaining and engaging. So the question then becomes how you're going to write that much content without it absolutely killing you. Moreover, there is a high chance that some people watching this won't speak English as their first language, or won't be confident in their ability generally to write in an engaging and entertaining manner. What if you're just not a good writer? In that case, you need to think about outsourcing the creation of your content. You can find writers on freelancing sites like People Per Hour, which is peopleperhour.com, or Upwork, which is upwork.com. This used to be called Elance. And you can also find them on marketing forums. The Digital Point forum is a good site to look at. It's forums.digitalpoint.com. And then if you look under the services section, you can find there's lots of people here who advertise things like content creation and so on. And also the Warrior Forum is a good place to look, especially the Warriors for Hire section, which you can find from the main menu, or you can go to warriorforum.com/warriors-hire. You can expect to pay anywhere from $1 to $5 per 100 words, but do keep in mind that you'll get what you pay for. It's worth paying a little bit more and getting a writer who will do their research and make your book sound professional. If you like, there's nothing stopping you from creating a detailed set of guidelines for them to follow and help them to see what the layout of your book should be and which key points you want included. That way, they write the book, but you remain the director, as it were. At these kinds of prices, you can create a book for $100 to $500, which in theory you should be able to make back. Of course, it's better to start with something you've created yourself, but if this is your only option, then it's still a viable model. Normally, you'll find turnaround time is very good too, anywhere from a few days to a few weeks.